At the restart, Piquet hung fire, letting Prost into the lead. But such was the urge of the Brabham that Piquet was back in front after the first corner, followed by Prost, Tambay, Warwick, De Angelis, Lauda, Mansell, Senna, Alboreto, Patrese, Rosberg and Arnoux. In a disconcertingly short time, Senna's Tolman appeared ahead of Mansell's Lotus, which wasn't in Mansell's script at all. Eventually, Prost and Lauda were in line astern behind Piquet. Rosberg came in with incurable understeer. De Angelis in fourth place blew his engine and dumped oil on the Jochen Rindt. Piquet hit the oil and twitched. Prost, steering with one hand because he was holding fourth gear in with the other, hit the same oil and came off, a fateful slip-up. Lauda now closed up on Piquet, who was coming up to lap Alboreto at 180 miles an hour. Piquet was balked for a tiny moment. Piquet was irritated into an error. And Lauda went by, to the huge delight of the whole of Austria, who haven't loved anyone so much since the Emperor Franz Joseph. Lauda looked all set for first place, but his gearbox must have picked up hypersonic vibrations from Prost's, because suddenly it gave out altogether. Lauda stirred the stick, however, and found all the gears again except fourth. Piquet had dropped back with bald tyres, so Lauda came home first, with Piquet second and Alboreto filling third spot, after the unfortunate Tambay succumbed yet again to a bad...
The recovery of Lauda from injuries that had threatened his life had captured the attention of the world. Everyone was wondering whether he would be back in action at the next race in Italy, just 6 weeks after his accident. To the joy of the Italian fans, he was. As the grid formed up at Monza, Jacques Laffite was celebrating his first pole position. Alongside him was Jody Scheckter, but the Ferrari fans had eyes for only one man, Niki Luada. Only 42 days after his accident at the Nurburgring, the Ferrari team leader was back on the track and had qualified ahead of his teammate, who was 9th. Right at the back of the grid were the 2 McLarens and the Penske, punished for a fuel infringement. James Hunt would have to work hard in this race. As the pack was unleashed, it seemed that Laffite had made a perfect start. However, as the leaders came out of the first chicane, it was a 6-wheeled Tyrrell that led Laffite, Pache, Depailler and a quick-starting Regazzoni. Passing through the second chicane and heading for the Lesmo curves, Depailler had already passed Pache. Further down the pack, not all the drivers were handling the chicane well. Mas decided to cut corners a little. Mas was trying hard to make up for lost ground, but he was perhaps trying too hard. He was the first retirement after just 3 laps, and he was followed 2 laps later by Pache. After only 4 laps, Peterson had moved into second place behind Scheckter. Meanwhile, Lauda, slow at the start and running 12th at the end of the first lap, was beginning to move through the field, running 7th after Brabham. 6 laps later, the Swedish driver took the lead when Schechter's engine went off song. He led the 2 Tyrrells, while Lafitte and Regazzoni were engaged in their own battle. A few lengths back, Brabham and Lauda were fighting over 6th place.
On lap 12, the wishes of the partisan Italian fans were fulfilled when Hunt, the Englishman who was daring to challenge a Ferrari driver for the championship, retired after trying to outbrake Tom Price at the second chicane. James exchanged good wishes with the marshals as the leading trio lapped Nielsen's Lotus. As Hunt set off to run back to the pits, the fans no doubt thought his retirement was justice for the points he'd scored in Lauda's absence.
At the head of the race, Depailler was challenging Peterson strongly as the top 6 split into 3 fighting pairs. Peterson versus Depailler, Lafitte versus Regazzoni, and Schechter versus Lauda. In time, the scrap among the top 6 developed into a 1-4-1 formation, with Peterson pulling ahead, Depailler, Lafitte, Regazzoni and Schechter at it hammer and tongs, and Lauda losing ground but still in touch. Schechter dropped back as his engine continued to lose power, but the remaining drivers played out a superb battle. None of the trailing 3 looked like challenging Peterson for the lead, however, although Regazzoni and Lafitte closed in on him in the final laps. At the flag, 3 seconds covered the first 3 cars. But it was the 4th finisher that captured the imagination. Niki Lauda's fight back from the burns that had led to him being given the last rites in Germany was a magnificent example of determination and heroism. The reception he received from the crowd and the track workers showed the respect in which he was held.
And confiscated championship points had been redistributed. Lauda was now only 3.5 points ahead, which meant that if Prost finished first, Lauda had to be second or he would not be champion. The mathematics of it all were perhaps lost on some of the local entrepreneurs. And so, in every sense, it all came down to Estoril. The smart place to be was in the McLaren pit. Princess Stephanie was there, disguised as a boy. Lauda reckoned she was Prost's problem. Rain stopped practice, so the mechanics played football. The heavy police presence tried to confiscate the ball. Mansell got the ball back. Lauda and Prost disappointed the journalists by behaving like the gentlemen they both are. Piquet had won his 9th motor scooter, and once again Prost was beside him. Senna and Rosberg were in the second row. Lauda started from 10th, 9 places. After the Renaults came Johansson's Tolman and both the Alphas, and only then Lauda in 13th place, 3 worse than when he'd started. Biding your time is one thing, but this looked like lethargy. Piquet spun off on the first lap and rejoined low down the field. Rosberg put distance between himself and Mansell, but Mansell could not do the same with regard to Prost, who eventually went by into second place. Lauda made progress as far as Johansson, who was running 6th. Prost slipstreamed Rosberg down the long straight and then outbraked him with cruel ease. Rosberg then found Mansell trying the same maneuver. Rosberg chopped Mansell out, crying the Finnish words for, "I remember Dallas, you pommy bastard." But on the next lap, Mansell's Lotus had what Rosberg's Williams hadn't. Held up for a long time by Johansson, Lauda remembered his mistake at the Nurburgring and didn't repeat it. Lauda bided his time for many laps and eventually saw daylight. Johansson butted him, but it was a farewell gesture. Lauda's next obstacle was in 5th place, Alboreto. But the long straight settled that. Prost had no one to overtake except back markers. But Lauda still had 3 cars between him and the championship, or 2 after he took Rosberg. Senna was running strongly in 3rd place, but he couldn't keep Lauda out of his slipstream. Lauda swept past Senna, but still had 1 car, Mansell's, between himself and the great prize. Alboreto spun off in 5th place, but kept going. Mansell's spin was more serious. One of his front brakes was grabbing. You could see smoke coming out of it when he got going again. This was all that Lauda could have hoped for, but that was no consolation to Mansell as Lauda raced by into 2nd place. Mansell did his bulldog breed best to get back what he had lost, but the brake had popped a caliper and soon threw him off definitively. Mansell kept going, but it was now clear that he was going only as far as the pits. Lauda couldn't catch Prost and didn't need to, so he prudently turned down the boost. Prost did the same and ran out an easy winner of the race, some compensation for the loss of the championship. Lauda came home to his 3rd World Championship, with the lapped Piquet and Rosberg, both ex-world champions themselves, saluting him like chase planes.